Hello and welcome back to the Python Career Development Series. In this newest episode, I shall be diving into Flask, showing you how to use these to get you started on databases. Today's video is once again going to be stepping it up in difficulty. We shall start off by installing Flask and making your first Flask program. Then we will be going through some basic that are absolutely must-knows. Following on, we will make a very basic form and start looking into SQL to set up some databases in Python. Databases are absolutely vital in your programming career and is one of the main reasons so many companies and careers use Python. So let's get into installing. So the first thing we need to do is open up your command terminal. Now in this command console, from the first episode we will have installed pip. We use pip to now install Flask. Pip install Flask. Perfect. Now we can create a new program. When you save this file, do not save it as flask.py, as this makes the program fail. I would also highly recommend creating a folder for every Flask program you have. This will make more sense later as you will be making these folders bulkier. Now let's get onto the coding. We're going to begin by importing Flask into our program. Following from this, we will need to create the Flask application. So to this, we're going to set up a variable. For this, I'm going to call it app to make the code much more readable. Perfect, and we're going to set this to Flask brackets __ name __. Now we are going to be launching into a new thing in our programming adventure. These are decorators, indicated by the @ symbol. Decorators are used in Python to modify the functionality of a function without having to change the function itself. You place @ before a function, and after it will run the function in front of that line of code with the extra functionality making it an enhanced function. Please let me know if you'd like to see a video explaining decorators fully. So the decorator that we'll be using in Flask is called root. We use our app.root and this will be the directory of the web page we're about to put in. Since we just want the standard directory, we just put a /. Now we need to create a function that will run on this directory. You can call the function anything you like, but just for readability, I'm going to call it hello, making it return hello Flask. Just so we create a very simple web page with just the words hello Flask on it. Now, lots of the time when using Flask, you could be asked to start the Flask program from the command prompt and run the server that way. That is slightly more complex though, but to do that, you would need to cd to your Flask folder. Then once you're there, we will run the following command: export flask _app equals, then the name of your Flask program .py. The next line we run flask and then enter. Once you've done this, you will be given a development server with a directory that you can place in your search engine. However, we don't need to use the command prompt. If we come back into Python, we can use these two lines. If __ name __ equals, then speech marks __ main, then app.run, and we want it to debug, so in brackets we want debug equals true. Now we can just run the Python program and it will create the server inside of our Visual Studio Code that you can now go onto your search engine. When we go to the server, we are greeted by the words hello Flask, which is what we were expecting. Amazing. So now we have our Flask up and running. Now we can get into making it do what we want. Let's do a quick new page on a different directory. So we use the decorator again, and this time the directory is going to be a /welcome. Then we will create a function called welcome, and all this web page is going to say is this is the welcome page on the welcome route. Save and run this program and append /welcome onto the URL, and just as easy as that, we have created an extremely welcome page. Now I want to make the pages a little bit more exciting though. These web pages have been absolutely boring so far. So we are going to add on some imports list render _template. Now it's time to introduce some HTML. So we begin by creating the HTML file. So head over to the folder we created earlier that is storing our Python program. Create a folder called templates. And now in this folder I'll be saving my HTML file. I'll be using this basic HTML program. This will be for my about page. So I save it in the folder as aboutpage.html. Now it is time to use it in our Flask program. Very easy. We create a directory and function called about for this example, but we just place in the return render underscore template and then the name of the file, aboutpage.html. Now we run it and go to the directory about, and now our about page is there. Great stuff. Now that we can create a server in Python and run a HTML document into it, we're now going to use the power of Python to add some complexity and process into your web page and eventually databases. Let us begin with a list of names. We will just call it names. We are going to create a new directory for our web page called names and render it in a HTML template called names.html. Then we're going to add a list in so that this list name is names is rendered into our file as information. Amazing. Let us go into our HTML template now. So it starts out as a normal HTML, but it's time to add in some processes. We do this with curly brackets. So to add our list into the HTML, we do double curly brackets and then information. So that is the name we were using. So now on our web page, it comes up with welcome to the names page, then the list of names I receive, followed by the list of names that I gave the HTML template from my Python program. Now onto our operations in HTML. We're going to go through the for loops and if statements. So to begin with the for loops, we use curly brackets followed by a percentage symbol. As we're using the logic, the percentage sign is used. We use the for loop like we already know. For name in information, meaning we're going to go through every value in information and set it to the variable name. Now to print the name is the same as previous with double curly bracket and the variable name. We then use \br to go onto a new line. Then, unlike Python, we need to end the for loops. This is done with curly brackets, percentage sign, end for, and then closing it. Now when we run it, we get our list nicely separated out across lines for us. A quick little teaching here, we can add methods into our lines, for example making everything uppercase. We put a vertical bar followed by the word upper next to it. Finally, using if. As you can imagine, this is extremely similar to what we just did. We begin with the logic brackets using an if statement the same way we would in Python. For this, we will check if the name John is in our list of names information. After this, we will write the result if the if statement is true. For this, we will just print that John is in our list of names. So there you go. But what if we want to add an else in? Then we just use the logic brackets afterwards, followed by else. Then after this, we write John is not in the list of names. Lovely. So now when we run the server and go to our names directory, we get shown that John is in our list of names. However, if I delete John from the names list in our Python, it will instead tell me that John is not in the list. Make sure you have got a firm grip on everything we have just gone through, as now we are leaving this chapter behind and stepping into even more complexity in our second chapter, where we go through making forms and using SQL for our databases. Alright, so let's begin by making a new Flask program. So this will be a whole new folder that I'm going to call Flask Form. In this folder, I need a templates folder to create a new Python file where we're going to write this code. Amazing. So let's open up this file and begin typing in. Beginning, I'm going to write in the basic Flask setup, but this time I'm also going to be importing requests from Flask. To begin, we create the route we want the form to be on, then place a comma and then methods. We're going to define two different methods, get, which will be the method whilst waiting for the form to be submitted, and post, the method for when the form has been submitted. Then onto the function. Now we are going to use request that we imported in earlier. We are checking to see which method we're currently in on the web page, or whether the form has been submitted or not. We are checking if the form has been submitted by checking if the method is post. If it is, then we are going to grab the username and password using request.form, using the name we will be defining in the HTML document in a moment. Once the form is done, we just want to display a thank you on the web page, so return form submitted thank you, then the username we just received. Now, for when we are waiting for the form to be submitted, or in other words, whilst the method is get, we're going to be running our template on HTML, which I've called form.html. But what does this HTML document look like? Well, let's go through it. Beginning, it is all stuff we have seen before. However, then we get down to form. So we define form, and then next to it we have method, and then set to post. It is set to post so that our form data is sent to the server. Now, to create the body of the form, we use a label for the username followed by a text box that is made with input. We want it to be called a regular text box, so the type is text. The variable that we will receive at the server is called username. Then we put required there, so the form can't be submitted if the text box is left blank. We do the same for password, but this time the type of input is password, so that the text box will fill up with asterisks instead of displaying the password. Finally, we need to create the button to submit. This is done with the input type, submit. The button will display login on the front, and then we can end the form element. Perfect, we now have created a form on HTML that will feed information on the form back to our server. So let's run it and see what happens. First, our form comes in. When we try and submit it, it will tell that I need to fill in the boxes. Then I type in the boxes my name, Sam, followed by some random stuff in the password box. Then pressing submit, and now the form is submitted and our form submitted message pops up. Amazing. We have now made an extremely basic form in Flask. Well done. Now we're going to SQL and databases. By the end of this, you'll completely understand this new Flask file and be able to start creating databases of your own. Alright, so let's just start nice and slow. We're going to create our very basic Flask program. We're going to import Flask, render template and request from Flask, create the application and run and debug it. Now we have our server set up and running. Next, we're going to import SQLAlchemy with from Flask_SQLAlchemy import SQLAlchemy. Before we go any further, we need to store the database on our PC. So go to the folder that you are using for this Flask and add in a new file called instance. This is where the databases are going to be stored and we can access them from. Perfect, so let's get into bringing our database to life. In order to do this, we use app.config. Now inside the square brackets, we're going to place in SQLAlchemy_database_URI. This is a key that will specify the database connection URI. Then we put equals SQLite : // then the name we want the database to be. For me, I'm putting details.db database. Perfect. Now we need to initialize SQLAlchemy with db equals SQLAlchemy brackets app. So now our Flask application is running SQLAlchemy and we have a database called details. Now, what do we want our database to store? Well, in most cases, we want every user to have their own user ID number. We want to also store their username and password. So, if we think of it as a table, we want one column for ID number, one for username, and one for password, which is exactly what we are going to do now. So let's create a class called details, which will be our table. For this class, we'll be receiving db.model. This will be creating a database model that is going to be corresponding to a table in the database. Now to make the table, the first column is ID. So ID equals db.column. The ID is an integer, so in brackets we put db.integer. The ID is a primary key, so we set primary_key to true. The primary key means the ID uniquely identifies each row in the table. The username is a string, but we don't want the username to be any larger than 20 characters, so we put 20 in brackets. The username is also unique, so we set that to true. And finally, the password will just be the maximum 20 character string. We now have just got to create our table. Now to create the tables, and to make sure the tables are up to date, we do this command. So for this, we want the tables to be created every time a request is made. In smaller applications, this is fine as it doesn't override or create a new table if there already is one. So for this, we use @app.before_request. This will make sure the following function is ran before any request is made. Then we're going to create the function that will run the command db.create_all. Amazing. We have now done all our setup for the table and database, so let's get into using it. So let us start by creating a form, just like the forms we've already created previously. This will be up for a sign up page. This is the HTML we'll be using, and as you can see, is the exact same as previously. Perfect. So now let's create this form in Flask like usual with the root sign up with the methods get and post. Then a function sign up, we return the template sign up, then go into the checking the methods post and getting our username and password from the form. Amazing. So that is all the things we have seen before. So now let's get into using this database. First, we want to grab all the information that is already in the database. This is so we can check that the username that was given doesn't already exist. To do this, we use users equals details.query.all. Then we need to run through each user and check the username. So we use for user in users. Then we check that in the object user, if the attribute username is the same as the username we just received. If so, then the page will return this username already exists. Now we want to use a list that will store all the IDs that are currently in use in the database. So then inside the for loop, as we loop round each user, it will then add their ID into the list. Now that the for loop is done, we have got to find what ID is going to be assigned to this user in the database. For this, I'm going to set a variable to 1 and then keep on increasing it by 1 until we reach a value that isn't in our list of IDs. Once found, we have now got the information we need: a unique username, an ID that we will use as a primary key, and a password. So to add this, we just now need to create an object called new_user from our class details. We will then set the attributes of this object to all the values we have just gained. Perfect. And then to add this new user into our database, we do db.session.add_new_user. Then to commit the changes, we use db.session.commit. Amazing stuff. We have now just created a sign up form that stores all of the login details in our database for later use. We will now just return you have signed up successfully to finish off this route. Alright, let us run it. First, our normal form comes up. Let me write in some information. Let's say username is Samuel and the password can be anything. Let's say chicken. I then press sign up and it tells me I've signed up successfully. Now let us go back into this form and try and add Samuel into it again. Now when I press sign up, it tells me that this username already exists. Right, we have now made a sign up page, but now let us do a login page. This will be a lot simpler to understand now that we have got a grasp on the sign up page. So once again, the login HTML is nothing different to what we have seen already. Now to create the form, it is once again no different to our previous forms, but it is time to add some things into it. For login information to work, all we need to do is take the value of the username and password and then check that somewhere in the database there is a matching username and password. So once again, let's grab all the information from our database with users equals details.query.all. Then we run it through the for loop, storing every account detail in the object user. We will then just check every single one to see if the username and password match. If they do, then we will return the message, welcome back, and then their username. If we don't find a match after running through everyone, we will instead just return incorrect login details. Perfect, and that is all. So now when I run the server, if I type in some rubbish, then it will tell me incorrect login details. If I type in Samuel but the wrong password, then it will tell me the same, and vice versa. However, if I type in Samuel with the password chicken, then it will tell me welcome back Samuel. Now that we have a login and sign up page, we can now visualize the database. So if we want to make our database a nicely set up table, we do as following. First of all, we will just use the root details. We will then be grabbing all the information from our database and then running the template table.html and sending all our database information to this HTML with users equals users. Now let's go to our HTML document, as this is all Python needs to do. I'm going to run through building a table in HTML. So let us begin with making the table, and we will set the size of the borders to 1 for this. We will then use tr. Everything that goes in between this element will be a new row. So this will be the top row, so it will be header cells. To do a header cell, we use th, and in between this element, we write its value. So our first column is user ID, second is username, and third is password. Then, just like that, we have our top row. Now let's get into what we learnt earlier. We can use our curly brackets and percentage to make a for loop just like in Python, and then using the users that we uploaded into HTML earlier from our Python code. We once again will be taking user from this and running through each row in the database. Let's begin with creating a new row in the for loop, as every single time we get to a new user we will need to be on a new row. Now inside, we will set all our data cells to using TD. We will be using double curly brackets so we can access the user's attributes. Then into these data cells, in the first one will be the ID, then the username, and then last the password. Then to show that this is the end of the row, we use /tr. That will also be the end of our for loop, so we use curly brackets, percentage, end for, then ending the table as well. Perfect, now we have used our database to create a table for us in HTML. Let's give it a look. Going on to our details route, we have our database nicely laid out for us. I'm just going to add some more details in through our sign up form to make our table a little bit more stacked. And there we are. We are nearing the finale of our video now, so we have only got 3 new things to learn, but we're going to go through all of it in just one more route. So let's do this. We can use information placed in the root and store it as a variable. How do we grab just one user's information using the primary key, and how can we delete a user? To get into it, first of all, let's create a root called delete user. Next we do a slash, and then in between greater and smaller than symbols, we want to receive from the root an integer that will be stored in a variable ID. Then, when we come to the function, we want to receive this variable ID. Perfect. Next up, to get this user, we want to delete, we use user equals details.query.get ID. Now it will find the user in our database that has the ID or primary key that was in the root and storing all their info in the object user. To check the user exists, we will simply run if user. If they don't exist, then it will return user not found. If they do exist, we will then use db.session.delete and then the user in brackets, which will completely delete that user off the database, and once we've committed the changes just below. We will also be returning a message that the user has been deleted. If you guys would like to see a video where I go through all the different things you can do to our database like add, commit, delete and many more, please let me know so I can sort that out for you. Now let's give this a try. So I put in the root and let's say number 50. This does not exist, so I just get the message that the user was not found. Now we'll try and delete number 4. It comes up saying user deleted, and when I go to our details route, we can now see that user ID 4 is missing. Great, and that is it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me now test your knowledge on today's video to really double check that everything we have done has sunk in. First question, what line of code will be used to add hello.html into your Flask? What line of code sets up a route in your application? What does the code users equals details.query.all do? How would you add an object into your database? How would you place a for loop in your HTML document? What would be the line of code to receive a name from a HTML form? Finally, what input type would you use for a password in HTML? Amazing. The answer to these questions will be in the comments, so make sure to head down there and comment how you did. That is it for the video. Next time we'll be still using Flask, but pushing more into the HTML side of things and making our page more presentable, using CSS to style up our web pages, and hopping into some more ways that we can make our HTML and therefore our Flask application more interactive. I hope to see you there, and thank you again for watching this video. I do really hope you learnt something today, and if so, to subscribe and like the video to support the channel. Have a great rest of your day.